What do you think when someone says that they don't have the talent?
I had an agent, my first agent, who used to say talent is bullshit, And he said, what counts is somebody that'll stick to it and grind. Obviously, you have to have some talent to do anything like that. You and I are not going to be Michael Jordan, because we just
I won't be dunking on shit.
We don't have that.
Sure, yeah.
But within reason, right? Whatever,
Yeah.
it's the person that has the ability to stick to it. Not for day one or year one, but on and on, and keep. I always say that, like, today, people say I'm a talent. But for 30 years, they told me I was a bum.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Mark Groves Podcast. Today, I'm so honored to welcome Steven Pressfield.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh my God, it's so good to have you here. I think of, I was telling you before we hit record that years ago when I was a pharmaceutical rep, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to start writing and teaching about relationships. Who am I to do this? All the things. And a friend of mine gifted me your book, The War of Art. And I will say, fortunately, but unfortunately, it was exactly what I needed. And I say unfortunately because I had to confront all the ways in which I was not allowing myself to move forward. So turning pro, I mean, you're an author of many books. And I know that you've helped so many people move through their resistance to actually bringing what they love to life. And one of your quotes that has always struck me, and I share with people that are resistant to creating, is the more important a call or action is to our soul's evolution, the resistance we will feel towards pursuing it is greater, right?
Yeah.
Is that
definitely a principle of resistance of life, and which equates immediately to fear. Right. The more important a calling is, like you're talking, Mark, about how you were feeling like, oh man, I should be doing something different than being a pharmaceutical rep. And I'm sure that what you experienced when you thought about that was fear, right? Oh,
So
shit.
much.
What happens if I leave, this safe place where I am? But if I don't leave it, I'm going to die.
Right.
So it's just sort of a universal principle, I think, of resistance, that the more fear you feel to some kind of calling or enterprise or something that you want to do, the more important it is that you do it. The fear is the resistance to it, And in fact, I try to use that myself as kind of a guide. Like if I'm thinking about what next project I want to tackle, what book I might want to do, I ask myself, if I have like 3 or 4 in front of me, I go, what one am I most afraid of? And that's the answer I'm looking for. Whichever one I'm most scared of is the one that I need to do.
I'm sure for people listening, that's got to, because that makes you have to confront like the knowing. The knowing. It's like the fear is indicative that this thing, would you say it's like that it matters to you, that it's like a calling?
Yeah, exactly. And resistance, what force that I call resistance with a capital R, I don't know where it comes from or where it gets its intelligence, but it's really smart and it always knows. It's infallible, so that when it's trying to stop us.
Yeah.
It's like the devil, right? It's trying to stop us from, if you have a dream, Mark, and you say, well, I want to do this, I want to have a podcast, I want to help people or whatever it is, resistance somehow infallibly knows that's your calling, and it wants to stop you from doing it. So it will throw everything at you, but primarily fear, fear. And then, of course, all of those rationalizations that we come up with, how am I going to pay the rent?
Right.
Who am I to do this? What do I know about that kind of thing? That voice in our head that sounds like it's us. It sounds like it's you, Mark, saying, rationally assessing the situation, but it's not. It's the voice of resistance. And believe me, I've had so many emails and letters from people. We all have the exact same voice. It never changes. It's always full of shit. It's always lying to us. And it's always, trying to stop us from being our best selves and from following whatever our soul wants us to evolve to.
It seems like it's colluding with whatever is trying to it's almost like, especially if the transformation or the thing we're bringing alive is going to bring some change to ourselves, our community, our work, And really, maybe what makes us susceptible to it, I'm curious your thoughts, is that there's such a vulnerability to that exposure that we're just susceptible to resistance. Because, like, who wouldn't be?
Well, it is scary, right? I mean, what we're really talking about is changing our lives, right?
Yeah.
Somebody that thinks they want to be a comedian or they want to leave their job and try something else. They want to write a book or whatever it is. It's scary. It's going into the unknown, right?
Terrifying.
You're always going to leave us kind of a safe place to go into something that you don't know what's going to happen. So it is scary. And resistance piggybacks on that and uses that fear to try to stop us.
Yeah, in the book you talk about that we have all these fears that show up, with procrastination, right? And maybe if you could speak a bit more to procrastination.
Procrastination is like probably the primary manifestation of resistance, right? Because we don't have to say to ourselves, I'm never going to follow my dream. We say, I am going to follow it. I'm just going to start tomorrow, And that's procrastination is probably the most common and most destructive way to do it. But there's, susceptibility to distraction, going down a rabbit hole of scrolling something or anything
Today,
on social media.
Yeah.
And today is like, I always say, if you want to make $1 billion, come up with some invention that will plug into people's resistance and give them a chance to run away from whatever it is they want to do. And they did invent it, and it's called social media, And, we see what happens. We all go down a rabbit hole of clickbait and stuff like that rather than do what we know we ought to do.
Yeah, what do you think about the artist's relationship to their creativity when now there is a correlation to, is it going to get liked? Is it going to go viral? Is it going to get, like, is there going to be validation to my art? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. I just was watching Rick Rubin podcast. You know who Rick is, right?
Yeah.
And one of his principles, which I agree with completely, is if you go into the studio as musicians and your goal is to make a hit record, you've like shot yourself in the head already.
Right.
And what he preaches when he's working with musicians is, what do you love? What do you want to do, regardless of who's going to, how it's going to affect the audience? Because I find myself, if I try to second guess, the audience or the readership and think, oh, this is a surefire hit, I'm almost always wrong, really.
Shit,
and the things
right?
that I think only I would be interested in and nobody else is going to care about, those, for whatever reason, are the things that people respond to. It's like, there's a sort of a entrepreneurial principle. I know you've heard this a million times, like try to figure out what people need, what an audience wants, what they need. Do they need a new garage door opener? They need whatever, right? And then supply that. And that's supposedly a trick. But and I'm sure that works to some people, but I don't think it works if you're at all in the creative arts. Because if you think about Steve Jobs coming up with the idea for the iPhone, right? There was nobody out there saying, we need a phone that does all these, right?
Right.
He had to kind of lead them, right? He had to say, this is a thing, I love it, and I'm betting that other people are going to love it when they see it. And anyway, it seems like that's really the only satisfying way to kind of live your life if you're creative. If you're trying to second guess the audience, you're always doing what you think somebody else is going to like instead of what you really care about and what your passion, your authenticity is calling you to do.
Yeah. Okay. You had this amazing, I had to write it down because you had a quote that speaks to that, where you talk about a hack, and you had said that you learned this from Robert McKee.
Yeah.
That it's a writer who second guesses his audience. When they sit down, he doesn't ask himself what's in his own heart. He asks what the market is looking for. The hack condescends to his audience. He thinks he's superior to them. The truth is he's scared to death of them, or more accurately, scared of being authentic in front of them, scared of writing what he really feels or believes, what he himself thinks is interesting. He's afraid it won't sell. Like the kind of like zinger at the end is that, he doesn't ask himself, what do I want to write? What do I think is important? Instead, he asks, what can I make a deal for? And that zinger is the hack is like a politician who consults the polls before he takes a position. He's a demagogue. He panders. And I was like, shit, like that is because, the birth of my work was relational. And I've just found that I'm super impassioned by looking at how those relational dynamics expand more culturally, ideologically, right? Because there's so, and especially in today's age, there's so much ideological rigidity and a lack of conversation. These polls, and I felt so called to just like, I've got to talk about all this. But I could see myself. This is why I said your work is both a blessing and somewhat of a bit of a mirror, which I saw myself in that. I'm like, oh wow, I had sold myself out in a way, like sold out my art. And when I first started writing and teaching, and I'm sure for people listening, they can relate to this too, as entrepreneurs or creatives, it's like you're finally giving birth to what your voice is. It's finally coming through you. You've put the pen to paper, you've published the thing, you've recorded the first video, whatever. And then you start adjusting. And so it's like you then step back into the lack of authentic self-expression.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it's a constant battle to not do that, right?
Yeah.
It's like gravity is pulling us down, And I do want to, that definition of a hack, I got to give credit to Robert McKee, the great screenwriting, story teacher, has been a huge influence on me. That was, I got that from him, and he's absolutely right. But it is a battle constantly to not backslide into, and particularly if you have an agent or if there's anybody that's making money off you, they want you to do that bad thing, right? Oh, you had a hit doing this. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
Like we got Wheaties, we invented this cereal. Let's put another box of Wheaties out, And sometimes you do that because you want to explore, something a little deeper. But I think you have to constantly guard against that. And because there's always going to be another project that's scary for you.
Yeah.
And that's the one you got to find.
Man, that's such good direction. I'm curious for your when you created The War of Art, what was the inspiration for that?
Well, basically, I'm a fiction writer.
Yeah.
People who've read The War of Art, they don't know anything about that, but which is a great pain to me. But the way The War of Art came about is, when you are a working writer, your friends will come to you and they'll say, I've got a book in me, will you, what do? I don't know how to do it. So I would sit up with friends like till 2 a.m. and basically warn them against this thing that I call resistance with a capital R. I tell them, it's going to be a lot harder than you think, and you're going to want to procrastinate and go down a rabbit hole. You're going to get superficial. You're going to be blah, blah, blah. And of course, nobody ever listened to me. Nobody ever did. Nobody ever wrote the book. Nobody ever did whatever. So finally, I just said, let me just put this down on paper. I'll put it down on almost like a mimeograph sheet. And when somebody comes to me, I'll just say, here, read this. And I don't have to sit up with you. And so that was how The War of Art came really fast. It was like 2 months.
That you wrote it in.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, it's obviously a short book with short
chapters,
but it was just ready to come because it was been in my head for so long.
Yeah, and that idea of resistance, was it your own meeting of it because I know you said you get so many emails, you get so many letters, you get so many people are reaching out being like, this voice that I have, and you're saying, that voice everybody has, and it sounds the same, and you think it's you, but it's not you, it's this force.
Yeah.
How did you come up with the idea of capital R resistance?
I'm not even sure where it ever came from, but when you're a writer, you're always facing the blank page. Right. It's always that moment. And you can I feel a kind of a negative force radiating off that page at me, trying to push me away from it, and for a long time, I thought I'm the only one that feels this, I guess. I must, it must be easy for Hemingway or J.D. Salinger to just sit down and do it. And there's something wrong with me, that this is so hard for me. And when I wrote The War of Art, I really thought it was only for writers. People would say to me, my editor would say to me, this is for other people, so throw in a little bit of stuff in there but I was amazed at how broad that everybody feels this. Comedians, even photographers. I thought, why would a photographer feel resistance? But everybody does. Dancers, everyone in a creative field, like anyone that's trying to move from a lower level to a higher level, morally, ethically, creatively, resistance always wants to keep us down, you know?
Let me tell you about the Nantucket towels from Cozy Earth. Whether you're looking for a gift for a loved one or to spruce up your home, these towels are a winner. And we all know when you get touched by a beautiful towel, you're like, where did you get that? And how do I get one? These are the perfect balance of softness and absorbency and adding a touch of luxury to your daily routine. Not only do Kai and I love using these for ourselves, we also love the softness and quick absorbency for Jasper. Gentle on the skin and it keeps you warm right out of the shower. It's perfect for everyone in the family and a nice treat for guests who stay over at your home. These towels are practical, sustainable, and luxurious. They're made from an eco-friendly blend of cotton and bamboo viscose, and it has a unique rice weave construction that provides its quick drying capability. So wrap yourself and your family in love and warmth with these wonderful Nantucket towels. Just head over to CozyEarth.com and use the code GROVES at checkout to take advantage of Cozy Earth's generous offer of 40% off for our listeners. That's 40% off all their products, from loungewear to luxurious sheets, socks, and more. Head over to CozyEarth.com and use the code GROVES at checkout. That's CozyEarth.com and use the code GROVES for 40% off. What do you think for someone who's listening and they're facing resistance? What do you recommend for confronting it?
I mean, a lot of it is simply balls, you know, and willpower. I mean, it's just because it's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary and it's hard. And how do you do anything like that? You know, how do you, if you're overweight and you want to start exercising or you want to run a marathon, how do you do it, right? You just simply have to sort of, whatever works for you, put yourself on a program, you know? And the hardest thing, I think, is it's not so hard to do it day one, but it's hard to do it day 2, day 3, day 4, you know, day 61, day 210. You know, we were talking earlier about the Daily Pressfield, this book of mine, this new book it's a daily book, like a 365 daily book to sort of keep you going through the various manifestations of resistance and self-sabotage, which is what this is, that are going to happen. You know, so that's, you know, like there are predictable points, and I'm sure you know this in your own thing, Mark, predictable points where resistance will try to sabotage you. At the very beginning of a project, it'll try to keep you from taking step one, right?
Yeah.
Then you get into it a little bit and you get some momentum going, whatever it is, a book you're writing, a movie, a podcast you're going to put together, and you just kind of get some rolling and you're doing good. And then there's a point like maybe what I would call the end of Act 1, where you suddenly go, holy shit, what have I done? You know, I've left behind, you know, it's sort of like the moment when the Israelites left slavery in Egypt and they kind of got out and they saw the desert, you know, and they said, oh, shit, man, let's go back. Let's go back where we got, and then there are other predictable points along the way. So that's one of the things that this book is trying to address, to sort of, when you hit that point, to know that everybody else hits that point too. And you just got to gear up. It's willpower, it's desire, it's, you know, it's mental toughness to get through this thing. There's no hack. There's no easy way that I've found, you know?
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? We all want like the shortcut. Is there a shortcut that you can give me? And, you know, there's that saying that the juice is in the journey. Like, it's not about the outcome, it's about who you become along the way.
Yeah.
And I totally
Which is
agree.
true.
Right. Yeah. And I when I first got this, so I got it a couple days ago, and then I started it in the mornings. And this morning's was get up, do not lie there thinking. Nothing good ever came from that. Get up, begin your day, a quote that you have from Yogananda. And Yogananda says thinking. I know exactly what he means. He means resistance. And I was thinking about that because when I woke up before I read this, I was looking at my phone thinking. And then I opened this and I was just like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
So you structured it so that if you have a project, a creative endeavor, just want to change, become something, do something, you're like, I know the process. Like, do this daily. And amazing. It would be amazing to see what people can create just by committing to this every day. Because each day is not like 12 pages. It's a zinger.
Yeah. It's just a one page thing, you know?
Yeah.
Which, actually, I got Ryan Holiday, you know who he is, right? He actually gave me the idea for this for this book because of his book, The Daily Stoic,
Yeah.
And one of the things he told me, this is sort of like a marketing thing that I would never have thought of on my own. When he showed it to me, I said, oh, that makes a lot of sense. He said, make sure that each chapter is only one page, because when people read this, if they like something, they'll take a photo of it, with their iPhone, and they'll post it on Instagram or whatever it is. And that's what you want.
Yeah.
You don't want a chapter that goes 2 or 3 pages long. Besides,
Oh, that's
365 days becomes a big, big book.
Yeah, it did. Look at this thing.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And I know you guys self-published this, your wife and you. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can get the book on Amazon. And if you want to get like the souped up signed copy, you can get it from your website, but also, and then you have the gift box, which has the journal and also illustrations from Victor Juhas.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Who is the husband of our mutual friend.
Yeah, Terry Cole. Yeah.
So this is awesome. Okay, so what made you write this as because you've written Turning Pro, and you've written Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be, all these I love the titles of all these. What made you write this one?
I just thought, when Ryan Holiday said, a daily thing is a really cool thing, I thought that is a great medium. It's sort of like, when we were talking before, when people would come to me and say, I want to write a book and I don't know how to do it.
Right.
How do I do it? And it's, it's a tough thing to answer. How do you do it, or any long-term project? So I thought a 365-day kind of devotional is the perfect medium to do this, because you can start on day one with the, just like you're waking up this morning, like the first morning you wake up, what do you do, right?
Right.
And then the first week, what is the first week like? And then, like I was talking about, predictable resistance points. Like one great one is what they call Act 2 horrors, right? When you're in the middle of something, it's sort of like if you compared it to let's say a football season, right? At the start of the season, you're all jacked up because it's starting, right?
Yeah.
And at the end, you got the playoffs. But in the middle, it becomes this terrible grind, right? Where you just got to get through, game 11, 12, 13, 14. And it's the same thing writing a book. So I sort of organized this book, The Daily Pressfield. When you get to the middle of it, it talks exactly about that,
Yeah.
and what horrors you're going to run into and what you can do to get yourself through them.
For someone who is encountering resistance, one thing that I read in The War of Art was about how you tend to be drawn or choose partners who are overcoming or have overcome resistance.
Ah, yes.
I wanted to hear a little more about that, because I'm sure for the
as
listener,
a relationship guru.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it.
I certainly noticed this in my own life, that when I was in the throes of losing to resist, being defeated by resistance, I would be drawn out. I would fall in love with somebody or become really drawn to somebody that really had their shit together,
Yeah.
And then later on, when I sort of started to get it together, I found that people would be attracted to me to sort of, and I could sort of see that they really there was a work that they wanted to do. Maybe they're a musician or whatever it was, and they couldn't quite do it. They were kind of mired in their own resistance. And so that being with me was sort of inspire them a little bit, But I'm not sure that's a great thing for a relationship, because is that, I suppose it can be, but it's a little bit of, you certainly need to be aware of that dynamic, Another thing that you sort of see sometimes, I'm sure that you've been into this, in your relationship stuff, Mark, is if there's something that we really want to do and we're afraid to do it, our resistance is stopping us, we might take a job as somebody's assistant who is doing that kind of thing, And I've seen it so many times where you can tell that the assistant is really a creative person and really has got a lot of ideas and really wants to do it, In fact, in my own life, for 5 or 6 years, I was part of a writing team, a screenwriting team, where I was the junior member of the thing. And my partner was the guy with the name who'd had hits, and I was like the slave that did the work.
Did all the
and
stuff.
I was absolutely in that role, where my partner was kind of a mentor to me, but at the same time, I was sort of chafing, I was like, well, shit, I got good ideas too,
Yeah.
So anyway, that is a common dynamic of somebody stuck in their own resistance being drawn to somebody that's gotten past it and is really working.
That makes sense. I mean, I can see how you want to like almost absorb what they do or witness how they overcome resistance. But at some point, you're right. You have to be the one who takes the leap off the cliff. You have to be, and I see so much correlation between the courage to open up to someone, to be vulnerable, to set a boundary, to like all these new versions of us that require us walking off a cliff. And of course, I see the same capital R resistance is in your head saying like, they might not love me, they won't choose me anymore. And I think of that relationally, how let's say our greatest fear is we're going to be rejected, right? That in the birth of me not creating the work or the self-expression, I actually live in the very rejection that I'm trying to avoid. And then I think, well, if that's the way I'm living, my body can't feel very good. You know, like everything sort of adds on to that, like how we feel physiologically.
Yeah.
Right? And then our habits start to reflect the mopey mope kind of, well, no one's going to listen. And, you know, and it's interesting how something that makes you confront death will often make you give birth to something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's sort of a hitting the bottom moment, right? Like, holy shit, it could all be over tomorrow, you know?
Yeah.
What's really important, right? Yeah. I mean, a lot of times when we ask ourselves, how did people change, right? How do you change? How do I change? A lot of times it's some horrible moment, you know, that where we hit some kind of wall, you know, somebody leaves us, you know, or we have a terrible accident or we get a diagnosis or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's too bad we can't just do that on a regular day, you know?
Yeah, you know, I remember talking to this guy named Koshin Paley Ellison, and he's a marriage and family therapist and also a Zen monk. I was like, that's a pretty cool combination of things. Family systems and the universe. That's great. And he was saying, I was asking him, like, what's the difference between someone who has a diagnosis and someone who, and then they start everything, and then someone who doesn't? And he was like, simply the acknowledgement of death. The diagnosis is just the pathway to the acknowledgement. I was like, that's so obvious.
Yeah, but so hard to do. What are you going to do? Like sit down and face, you know, you should imagine your own death. Imagine it's all over and then say, what's really important to me? I had a little event, I know this said apropos of nothing, but it's kind of a long story. Can you bear with a little story here, Mark?
I love a good story. Let's go.
A friend of mine and a real mentor to me, a guy who was like maybe 15 years older than me, named Norm Stahl, died a little while ago. And I went to his memorial service back on the East Coast. And you know the way people will get up and they'll tell stories about, you know? And so here were two stories that people told. The first one was Norm's son got up and told this story. And he said, you know, you're trying to encapsulate a person's life, right? What you know, he made money, succeed, blah, blah, but didn't tell those stories at all. He said that at one point, Norm had a cousin. They kind of grew up together, and the cousin borrowed $15,000 from him and never paid him back. And it was like a real sore point in the family, you know, for years, you know, because they would see each other at various events. And then finally there was like one family event when everybody was there, like Christmas or something like that. And it was a real strain in the air between were they going to, and at one point, Norm, my friend, just walked across the floor to his cousin, and everybody was sort of watching this, and he just put his arms around him and hugged him, you know?
Oh, wow.
And so that was the moment of Norm's life that was encapsulated. I'll tell you, there's another one, but you get the point from that.
Yeah.
But what I thought about that later, and I thought it was sort of like seeing your own death in a way. It's like, I'm sure Norm had a moment where he thought, what's important in this life? I could bear a grudge against my cousin forever, you know, but I love the guy, you know, he's my flesh and blood. We grew up, we played football together. What do I care about 15 grand, you know? And so he made that great gesture, you know, and that you could see that in summing up his life, Norm's life, that was what his son picked out of all the things he could have picked. And I think it's really true. So God bless him, you know, Norm, wherever you are, that, you know, that was a great thing to do. If we could only all do that, what is really important? And in terms of like living your dream, that's important.
Yeah.
You know, if we thought to ourselves, I'm going to die and I'm never going to do it, you know, maybe that's motivation to get us, you know, off our asses and do what it is. Because, you know, you can die tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah, I think a lot about that of like we don't have time. You know, it's such a fallacy. Is that the right
Yeah.
word?
Yeah.
It's just like it's this idea that our calendar goes longer than someone else's. Like I can tough it out. As you said, the I will do it, but I just won't do it today.
Yeah.
And that just becomes every day. And it's amazing once you start getting into like the daily practices that you're talking about in your book, that the momentum is bananas. Like all of a sudden you look back a week or a month, because now, you know, I have to do this because I saw your book this morning and it was speaking to me, is I have to read your book before I do anything else because that's a dedication to the craft.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, I think relationally, one thing that really changed just up-leveled relationship and commitment and my relationship to my wife and having a son certainly did that, but was actually just this recognition that our time together is sacred. Our relationship is sacred. And I think of the gift of what is trying to move through me as being sacred. So who am I to not treat what is trying to call it God, call it whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think like to be trusted with something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Particularly a young life that you're bringing into the world, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then like to be trusted with that, to be trusted with my wife's love, to be trusted with words that are trying to be spoken or written through me. Like now I sort of look like it's not an act of reverence or love to not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's an insult,
Yes.
you know, to the practice, to whatever it is that you're doing. And the other
Yeah.
thing is when we don't do what we're supposed to do, we get sick. You know,
Yeah.
it's not a what's it, a no fault situation, whatever that phrase is, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, there's that energy that's inside you that wants to be a podcast or wants to be a book or wants to be something in a relationship. If we don't act on it and we don't bring it forth, it doesn't just go away. You know, it goes into other channels, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes into our bodies, you know, and it goes into things like addiction or
Yeah.
depression or, you know, all of the vices that we suffer, you know, in modern society, alienation, isolation, abuse of
Yeah.
others, that kind of thing. It doesn't go away. It goes into something malignant. So we should do it.
So it
Whatever it is
almost
that we're supposed to do.
Yeah, because it sounds like what you're saying, which I agree with, is like you think it's an option,
Yeah.
but it's not.
Yeah.
Which I think that level of responsibility to it, that like there's actually a cost.
Yes.
And you're not going to like the cost because no one likes the cost. You know?
Yeah. It's like the thing of when the pain of not doing it
Yeah.
gets greater than the pain of doing it, because there is a pain. It is painful.
It is.
It's scary. It's hard. And the other thing that we don't talk about a lot is it's tedious. A lot of the stuff, you know, like if you want to learn the piano, be a concert pianist, you got to sit at the keyboard and do God knows what, you know, scales and
Yeah.
exercises for, you know, 10,000 hours or whatever it is.
Right.
Anything is like that, right? It's tedious. And so once you get into it, you go, oh, shit, why did I do this, you know? But at the end of the day, you have that good feeling, you know, I did what I was supposed to do today, you know?
Yeah.
But it's hard, it's scary, and it's tedious.
What do you think when someone says that they don't have the talent?
I had an agent, my first agent, who used to say talent is bullshit, you know? And he said that because he'd represented tons of writers, and he said that, you know, well, what counts is somebody that'll stick to it and grind. You know, obviously you have to have some talent to do anything like that. You and I are not going to be Michael Jordan, you know, because we just
I won't be dunking on shit.
We don't have
for
that.
sure, yeah.
But within reason, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
It's the person that has the ability to stick to it. Not for day one or year one, but on and on, and keep. I always say that, like, today, people say I'm a talent, but for 30 years they told me I was a bum, and I was a bum.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't learned. But if you can keep grinding and keep believing in yourself and keep doing it, that's another, skill they don't teach you. That you don't get a medal for that or anything. The ability to kind of keep going when you're not getting any satisfaction or any feedback. But if you can keep doing that, you will get better. You will, suddenly
the daily practice.
And it isn't even just skill. It's something more mystical, where at some point, for 15 years you couldn't do it, and then Tuesday comes along and now you can do it. Whatever it might be. But it's true. That whole thing of like hitting a rock, you hit the rock 1,000 times, and finally the 10,000th time the rock splits.
Right.
So it's beyond just getting better incrementally. There's a kind of a mystical thing to it that if you just keep grinding at it long enough, a tumbler clicks over and all of a sudden the lock opens,
Yeah. I remember recently just someone made a comment on a social media post I did where they had said, Mark got lucky, essentially how I managed some level of success. And I was like, man, you fucking have no fucking clue. Like, you didn't see the daily grinding, the posts twice a day, writing every day, recording, like the published things that crash, the published things that get it was good because it was fuel for me in a way. Like, we see the finished product.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But like, I think of your books that you write, they're written because you've been through these things. So you're able to alchemize this knowledge and put it on a piece of paper so that, in hopes that I don't have to go through what you went through, that I get to find, let's call it a shortcut, because I'm taking long cuts, like people who are losing to resistance can actually find a way to overcome resistance. And it's because you've done that you could tell people how to do that. If you hadn't, as you said, been a bum for a few years, you wouldn't know how to speak to that person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that guy who said that you got lucky, that's his own resistance talking. He wishes he was you. He wishes he had done, for whatever his dream was.
Yeah.
And he hasn't. So he's envious of you. So he takes a pot shot at you, So that is another sort of factor of when you don't do it, you fall prey to these vices like envy and things like that.
Interesting.
I feel sorry for that guy. I hope he turns it around.
Yeah.
But that's what that is. That's his own resistance because he sees you doing it, and it's a reproach to him. Like, well, if Mark can do it, why can't I do it?
Yeah. Why am I not?
Yeah. Well, why am I not doing it? Yeah.
I love the month of May as it invites the celebration of the women and mothers in my life. It's become even more special over the last couple of years, getting to celebrate Kylie in her journey into motherhood, both carrying Jasper in her womb and now in her arms. This month, in honor of the mothers and women in our lives, I wanted to share a very special blend our friends at Organifi brewed up specifically for women's health. Organifi's Harmony is crafted to help balance and support hormones so that you can feel great every single day of the month. Traditional herbal PMS support meets a cacao blend that's not just delicious, but promotes overall hormone balance, supporting women's health in the most magical way. This blend includes traditional ingredients proven to support a healthy cycle, adaptogens for relief from symptoms associated with PMS or menopause, and an energizing touch to lift the mood. It's got maca, a high antioxidant superfood used to support hormone balance and enhance energy. Cacao packed with polyphenols to support the feeling of balance. Chaste tree berry, never heard of that one, encourages a healthy estrogen to progesterone ratio, which makes sense, I never heard of it. Shatavari, a rejuvenating herb that promotes overall vitality. and supports hormone balance. It makes a wonderful gift for the incredible mothers out there for this Mother's Day or anytime. It also pairs wonderfully with Organifi's gold chocolate for a nighttime hot cacao to give you a balanced, relaxed, and more restful sleep. What mother couldn't use a little bit of additional rest? Use the code CREATETHELOVE for 20% off Harmony and all of Organifi's other amazing products at Organifi.com/createthelove. Have you always had a relationship to, because in your books, you do talk about this sort of mystical force, like this, like when you step into this, you're kind of getting right with God, getting aligned with message, getting aligned with universe, whatever the word is for people. Have you always had a relationship to what is mystical, or was it actually through the discovery of through your own work?
It's a little bit of both, I think, Mark. It's like when you're a writer or you're in any form of the arts and you're beating your head against the wall every day, right? You have to ask yourself, it's inevitable. You say, well, where do ideas come from?
Right.
I'm struggling to find them. I can't find them, and then suddenly there's one, and you realize it's not coming from you, right? It's coming from someplace else. And the way that, that you will get an idea in the shower or when you're driving on the freeway, where it's a moment when your ego kind of lets down, and things come through. You open like that illustration on the top of, it's
on the top
if
of
you
the
can
box?
see it on top of the box. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it's called, Vic did this, it's called the Cosmic Radio Station. And it's just like a Cadillac, in my mind, driving a convertible, driving across West Texas at night with this huge antenna, and trying to tune in to the cosmic radio station. And I think
That's great.
when you ask yourself, where do ideas come from? They obviously come from someplace else. And so you can't help but be humbled by that. And, I'm a big believer in the Greek goddess concept of the muses.
Yes.
The goddesses that inspire artists, right? And but that's just the way my mind works. I like to put a human face on something. But so anyway, that at some point it really became clear to me that we writers and artists are operating on the material plane, but there's a plane above us. And the more we can open the pipeline to that plane, the better off we're going to be.
How long did it take for you to go from like living the life you were living to actually answering that call to really?
I'm not sure I understand
because
what
how
you
you're
mean by
saying, like when you had different jobs that weren't writing.
Ah,
Like, were you always a writer your whole life, or
no,
right?
no.
So I'm curious, like, what made you transition? Like, when did you finally take the leap?
I was trying to write forever.
Yeah.
And getting nowhere at all. Things not published, they were just terrible. And finally, I started, when I started working with a partner in the movie business, that was the first time that I ever was actually able to pay the rent through my partner, through being his apprentice. And then, we kind of had a divorce, which always has to happen. But then, so I'd been trying now probably for like 30 years and still hadn't really ever written in my own where I felt it was really coming from my heart. And then just one day, actually it was with the book of The Legend of Bagger Vance, where something came out of me. And this is why I believe in this higher dimension that was coming from a different place. In a better place. That was really, and it wasn't necessarily my voice in the sense that, was Steve Pressfield or anything. It was coming from somewhere else. I was like being channeling something. But that was when, for me, that tumbler turned and the lock opened, But it took like 30 years of hammering on the stone before it finally cracked.
And I know you share a story where a novel you wrote, I can't remember which novel, maybe it was Bagger Vance, that when you submitted it, they were like, nah, this is not gonna, but it ended up being your best-selling novel.
I don't know if it was it was probably me that thought nobody's going to be interested in
Well, it
this.
was like something about how a certain type of novel doesn't generally succeed in the writing world.
I'm
But
not
then
sure which.
I'm trying to remember
It
which
seems
one it
like
was.
the ones for me that have succeeded, that's what they've been. They're the ones that people would say, "Oh, this never works. Nobody's ever going to buy this," and then it does.
And then it crushes.
Well,
Yeah.
even a modest success is a good thing.
Yeah.
And then the things that you thought were going to be great, they lay an egg completely.
Yeah, I've always thought that's kind of funny. It's like I remember I once launched this program that I thought this is it. Like this is everything everyone wants. And then I launched it to like 600,000 people and it was like $47.
Uh-huh.
And I think 6 people bought it. And
Uh,
I was like, that is not what people want. And really going into, was I authentic in the creation
Yeah.
of this? What is missing?
Yeah.
Not I'm a failure, which my younger version of me would have probably come up with, but actually like there's an opportunity here to get more clear. You talk about how personal
Let
growth.
me interrupt you for a second. Tell me about that a little bit. Like, what lesson did you take from that? What was your mistake or?
The mistake for me, well, the opportunity for me in that was that the lack of desire for people to participate in it was evidence not that it's the concept is a failure, but that I didn't present it properly. Like there was an opportunity for me to learn that some people want something different and I want to create something different. So how do I, because it was an authentic desire. It was like this combination of personal growth, which I want to ask you about. That's why it's perfect timing. It's like, it was this idea of really understanding yourself and changing fundamental core beliefs in 1 month, but combining it with fitness and nutrition at the same time. Because my thought has always been, if you don't get immediate feedback generally from personal change, like if you lay a boundary, it's usually pretty scary. And you're not like, I love myself now. This is great. You're like, will anyone love me? Will this work? Will my relationships be okay? But when you go for a walk, you do feel great. It might be hard, but like your body is immediately rewarded with, different hormones, chemicals. And so, I learned that I just didn't present it properly. And how do I do that? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's, I don't know what I've learned from those moments, but it's certainly so common. I'm sure if we had 20 entrepreneurs, writers, artists, everybody would have stories about, I knew I had it. This was a surefire hit that just completely bombed. It's just like William Goldman, William Goldman, the screenwriter, he wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, All the President's Men. And he wrote a book called Adventures in the Screen Trade. And the takeaway from that book was his thing, nobody knows anything. And he talks about how in the movie business, people will have like whoever originally produced E.T., they had the film that Spielberg had shot. They didn't have the script. They had the film that they could look at, and they thought it was a loser, and they sold it to another studio. And the other studio, Universal, took it and made it this giant hit. So, people turn down the Beatles, right? So what is it?
Yeah, like Michael Jordan doesn't make his high school team.
Right. That's another thing,
Yeah, and you think about how those failures, quote unquote, fueled, like really taking, like, did you take the practice of, writing something that doesn't get published and then actually be like, okay, I got to write more. That's resistance. Like, is that how you would label it?
I would say for me, I had to write more just because I felt like I can't accept this.
Yeah.
That I'm really this bad. I've got to get better. I can't accept it. And I'm sure that's how anybody that succeeds at anything thinks. You have a level of aspiration. You just say, I won't accept being below this. I am below it, but I can't accept that. I've got to I got to keep doing it.
Well,
where that comes from, I have no idea. Your parents or something.
Yeah, who knows? But tapping into it is important. And I think when I look at today, let's say, for example, the first post I ever wrote on Instagram, the first thing I ever published on Facebook, or the first blog I ever wrote, or the first video I ever recorded, I look at them and they're not great. you know? And, but when I wrote every day for 8 years, eventually you start to turn a corner. And I even look at writing from 2, 3 years ago and I'm like, oh man, I need to edit some of this, you know? And it's such an evidence of our own evolution, like evidence of what 1% change every day, or like practices like the Daily Pressfield, that if you do these things, you're going to look back and maybe you'll be proud that you started, maybe not. Like I looked some of the first videos.
But you do get better. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. You talk about how I think this is so good for the audience, for you guys to hear, because I heard it and I was like, shit. You talk about how resistance loves healing and personal growth. And I'm like, I love personal growth. That it like wants to be working on it? Is that sort of the idea or the premise?
I don't know. I just think that sometimes, and I'm sort of guilty of this in my quote unquote teaching, where I'm not sure if workshops and things like that really work, you know?
Right.
When you try
I like
to
this idea. Yeah.
And the idea of sort of healing, that's another thing, is that it's another form of resistance to me. It's like the concept is, let me heal first, then I'll get down and I'll do my work. And of course, there's no way to do that. You know, it's the work that's going to heal you, you know? So you have to somehow, you know, not procrastinate, not fuck around, sit down and start to do it, you know? What is healing anyway? You know, it's basically, I think when people feel that horrible feeling of depression, despair, I'm going nowhere, it's really because they're not doing their work.
Right.
You know, there's nothing wrong with them. They don't need to heal from that. Or the only way to heal from it is to sit down and do whatever you were meant to do. You know,
that's
totally the hard
agree
part.
With this. I feel like so much of our anxieties, depressions, I mean, you said earlier that, and I agree with this, it's almost like social media is the greatest thing that resistance ever came up with.
Yeah, true.
Like, oh, we were fucking around with you with your like inside voice, you know, there's sabotage, inner dialogue. We had you. We're in your heads. But now we like actually have a way for you to use all your time and fall prey to social scientists who their whole job, they're hired by resistance to actually make it so you never get anything fucking done. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I mean, anybody that's watching this now, turn it off and start doing, you know, go to the typewriter or the dance studio, whatever.
Finish this and then, but yeah, I mean, what you're saying about healing, I think is really important, because I find that people will get addicted to the idea of personal growth, because if you're reading books and taking classes and all those things, sure, there's like a baseline of knowledge that you can build, how to write, how to film, how to have a boundary. What does it sound like? The technical parts of these things. And I get to tell you, I'm taking a course. I don't actually have to yet be transformed.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And when I look at that, I think, okay, well, it's easy to get addicted to that because it will satisfy the audience around you.
Yeah.
Like, but look at what I'm doing, but you're not different. Like, even actually in the act of pursuing personal growth, or if it's from a place that I'm broken, then it just reinforces the idea that you're broken.
Yes. And it's, you know who Robert Greene is?
Yeah.
From Ryan Holiday.
I've had him on once. He's great.
He's great. What I love about his philosophy is it involves work, doing a certain work. You know, if you're going in personal growth, right? You know, you're taking a cold plunge in the morning, or you walk on your bare feet on the stones, and you do all that shit that they say is supposed to make you feel good. But when you're done with that, I mean, I haven't done that, so I don't know. Maybe you feel good for a few minutes, but Robert Greene would say, what work should you be doing? You know, is there a book? Is there a movie? Is there something that you should be producing? Sit down and do that work, and then you'll feel great. You know, and you'll have something. You know, you're actually enacting what the muses or God wanted you to do, instead of sort of preparing to do that.
That's interesting. Like the morning practices are preparing you for the thing, but just do the fucking thing.
Yeah, or do the practice and then do the thing, Don't just do the practice hoping it's going to get you to, some state of equanimity or whatever it is.
Yeah, again, that's that idea. When I get to the state, then I'll.
Yeah.
When I get to the healing, then I'll.
Yeah.
God, resistance is.
See, resistance is very duplicitous and diabolical, because you really think, oh shit, I'm really working hard. I'm getting up at 5 a.m. I'm going out, I'm taking a walk, I'm running, I'm channeling, I'm meditating, I'm writing in my journal, I'm taking a cold plunge. When really maybe you should be founding some school or some business or starting something, or writing a book or something like that.
I think about how applicable this is for so many people, and I love me a good cold plunge. But I agree with you. It's like finish the thing, and then like if you're going to have practices and rituals to prepare you for something, do the something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have another mantra that I believe in, and I've seen this elsewhere, and it's basically start before you're ready. Don't prepare for anything. Just start it,
Yeah.
And I'll tell you one little story here. I wrote a book a few years ago that was about a nonfiction book about the 6-Day War, the Arab-Israeli War of 1967. And I went over to Israel and I spent, weeks and weeks interviewing. And I came back with tapes up the yin yang, right? So I thought, okay, this is a serious project. I really got to do this in a serious way. So I'm going to transcribe, and so I started transcribing, like hours and hours of interviews, and like 3 months went by and I realized I was getting nowhere. I finally just said to myself, just write the fucking thing, and immediately the clouds went away and I just sat down and wrote it, So I thought, with the best of intentions, let me really prepare and do this seriously, prepare the ground, sometimes you got to just jump in and do it.
Yeah. So for people who are listening, watching, who is the Daily Pressfield for?
It's for anybody who is undertaking any kind of long form project, particularly alone. By which I mean not in some structured environment, where you have mentors or teachers or whatever it is. So writing a book is the classic thing, but making a movie or starting your podcast or whatever it is, because when you're alone, or maybe you have one or two friends that might, help you a little bit, you really are prey to your own resistance, to your own self-sabotage. Mm-hmm. And you'll come up with a million excuses why you can't do it. And you'll have crises, right? Well, you just can't overcome. I'm at page 60 of my novel and it's dog shit, What do I do? So this is sort of a 365-day thing that can help walk a person through, where when you're panicking, hopefully, on day 61, there'll be something that can address that. And you'll see, and hopefully what it'll say is, you're not alone. The stuff you're going through is, everybody goes through it, and take a deep breath or whatever,
Yeah.
Or here's a thing you should do, a specific thing you should do at this point. So it's somebody trying to do something long form over a year, 2 years, and you're alone to do it. That's who this is for.
Awesome. And you were saying that for people to grab it, to go to your website, right?
Yeah, the book is, I'm going to give a pitch here.
Yeah.
You can
pitch
get
away.
You can get it 3 ways. You can get it from Amazon, and they print it, and it's not printed as well as the ones you get here.
Okay, let me just qualify that this is very sexy. This feels good. It's got
it's a real quality thing.
He didn't pay me to say this, but this is like crisp. I can feel it.
So you can get it from Amazon and one of those, or you can even order it in a bookstore, and it will be unsigned. Or you can go to my website, which is just my name, Steven Pressfield, and you can get it 2 ways. One is just in a really nice box, signed, and the other is this gift thing that has a companion journal and
it's really nice.
Illustrations and cards and a lot of goodies in there. And what's great about this is it makes a great gift for somebody.
It's beautiful.
If somebody in your life is struggling with their own resistance, they want to make a movie or start a podcast or whatever, and they can't get off the ground, this is a great thing to give them, because it's a lot of ammo there, and it shows love, to give it.
Yeah, I believe in you is in
yeah,
the gift,
yeah.
which is so beautiful, especially from the people around us, where I think often when we're bringing a creative endeavor to life, like something that is
Yeah,
scary, I think a lot of the times it's the people who are closest to us
yeah.
that
It
don't
means a
like.
lot when somebody will do just,
Yeah.
here's something, Yeah,
I feel like it's like, I see you, I believe in
yeah,
you. That's beautiful.
yeah.
Well, we'll make sure we link it all out. And Steven, I could talk to you all day. I'm so grateful that you took the time, made the time. Like
Hey,
when
let's do this again sometime, Mark. This is great. Thanks.
well,
Terry, thank you for
yeah,
putting us together.
Terry Cole, who's been on the podcast 3 times, so people know her. I just want to acknowledge you because your book impacted me when I began this. And when I revisited it to prepare for this conversation and I read Turning Pro again too, I was again just so grateful because there was new, it's like a book you can read constantly to remind you of where we stop stepping fully into ourselves and actually accepting these gifts and honoring the muse. So thank you for what you
Ah,
do and,
well,
and
thank you, Mark.
putting
Thanks for
yourself
having
out.
me.
Yeah, thanks.
And the book is short.
Yeah, the War of Art is nice and short.
Yeah.
Turning Pro is short too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everyone, the links are in the show notes. Thanks again, Steven.
Hey,
Really
thanks, Mark.
appreciate
Can we reach
We can
across?
do it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.